I had always dreamed of working in the big city, wearing a suit, drinking coffee, attending meetings, and answering important business calls. As a child, you don't understand the monotony of it all. The pointless hours spent heading to the office, attending hour-long meetings, pretending to laugh at the same old jokes you've heard every day for years. The dream developed from the air of importance these people exude, while the rest of society tells you to go to university to be like them. That was all it was, a dream, full of fake smiles masking the miserable and stressed working class. It took the better half of a decade to realize overtime couldn't overcome nepotism in the corporate world, and another 5 years to shake the mindset that if I left it all behind, I was a failure. When they handed me the keys to the cabin, I'd been off work for 2 weeks and felt like a completely different person. My psoriasis disappeared, I'd kicked smoking, and was ready to start a new life off the grid in Powderhorn, Colorado. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and 40 acres to do whatever I pleased with. As an expatriate, the taxes weren't fun, but the price was so low I couldn't refuse. I'd been living at the cabin for about 2 weeks before I heard it. The first time I heard it, I was chopping wood for the fire outside. It sounded like a child, crying. I took my axe with me into the woods, though not sure I'd have the balls to use it, and called out to see if someone needed help. There was no answer. In fact, there was nothing but silence, and I tried to steady my shaking hands. A branch cracked behind me, and my body froze. Forcing myself to move, I looked in the direction of the sound. On one of the branches, an owl sat watching me. It broke the silence of the night with a loud shriek and sent me running back to my cabin. Each night the crying returned. The sound burrowed into my skull. It was so desperate and lonely. I couldn't handle it. I had to do something. I followed the screaming into the woods one night. As I went deeper, the sound got louder. The dull moonlight was enough to reveal the shape of a small girl about 50 meters from where I was standing. She stood next to a basket, though there was not enough light to know for sure. Unaffected by the rain, her figure swayed side to side, humming a tune while the screaming continued. I couldn't understand how I could hear her humming so loudly when I was so far away. She turned in my direction, and though scared, I felt a sense of embarrassment, like I was some creeper hiding in the bushes. I intended to call out to her, but she spoke first.
Can you see me?
Yes, are you okay? I called. I'm coming down to you. I lost sight of her for a second, and the girl was gone. The only symbol of my sanity was the basket she left behind.
Can you find me?
We don't have time for games, it's cold out here, I said, walking toward the basket. The girl started humming again. I couldn't help but shiver. The crying returned. It was coming from the basket. I couldn't stop myself from opening it. A baby, an actual baby, out in this cold for days. The guilt I felt was overwhelming. I'd just ignored the screaming for days.
I am right behind you,
the girl whispered in my ear. I turned to face the voice that had just spoken to me, but nothing was there. Heart racing, I intended to grab the baby, but when I looked back at the basket, it was gone. Where the baby had once been, there was nothing. The basket was empty. I was terrified and no longer willing to entertain the idea any of this was worldly. There wasn't any thought, just a pure fight or flight response. I'm not proud to say it, but I just ran. The girl laughed at my fear. When I finally found my way back to the cabin, I slammed the door shut and locked it. God forbid she'd followed me. I started a fire to ease the chill in my bones. I questioned if I'd seen the child in the basket. It happened so fast. I could have been seeing things, but what I couldn't deny was the girl I'd encountered was not normal. Later that night, I awoke to a sound coming from downstairs. As I got to my feet, I couldn't identify it at first, but when I did, my blood ran cold. Someone was trying to open my front door. "Who's there?" I called. They didn't answer, only continuing to rattle the doorknob. I turned away from the door, looking for my rifle, when my stomach dropped. The chill of the night swept through the cabin as the door opened. "I have a gun," I called, walking down the stairs. Trying to steady my breath, I scanned the cabin. It was empty. The door was slightly ajar, creaking in the wind. I reached out to close it when a girl's voice spoke to me.
Do you remember me?
Caught off guard, I hesitated and 2 hands appeared clawing at the open door. I slammed the door closed and backed away. Something was laughing at me. "Stop, please stop." Then there was silence. Looking out of the peephole, she was there, staring at me. Then she was gone. I couldn't sleep that night. I was too scared to shut my eyes. I fled my property in the early hours of the morning and headed into town, unsure of what to do. Eventually I found an open diner, ordered coffee, and sat down.
Traveling through these ways for something?
Do I really look that out of place?
Well, let me see. Could be the strange accent or pale skin. People living here have a healthy layer of dirt from hard work. But it's mostly the look.
The look.
Tired as hell? Bags under your eyes? Usually mean long hours on the road headed somewhere more important.
I just moved here. It's been a long night. I don't think you'd believe me.
Ah, the old trust property just sold. You the new buyer?
Trust doesn't ring any bells. I'm out near Maplewood Range.
I'm not surprised those sleazeballs didn't let you in on the history you were buying into. A lot of strange noises coming from your property, sir.
You wouldn't believe the half of it.
Bet you I would. You're not the first to try to make that property work. They always end up in here one time or another.
What happened there?
Well, I'll have to serve these folks. The library has one of those old machines you can look newspapers up on. I'd suggest looking into John Trust.
I got the feeling if the waiter really wanted to, they'd have the time to tell me. But a lead was a lead. I spent the next 2 days in between the library and a hotel before I was confident I'd found all the articles. On October 3rd, 1906, John Trust, the original owner of the property I'd purchased, reported his 2 daughters, 8-year-old Belinda and 2-year-old Dorothy, as missing. In conjunction with the public, local authorities formed a search party but were unable to find either girl. Police originally believed the 2 girls had wandered off and found themselves lost in the wilderness. Now with the spotlight on the Trust family, they discovered Belinda, the oldest, was considered a problem child. Apparently, Belinda had undergone multiple exorcisms, and the circumstances surrounding them turned John Trust into the pariah of his community. 3 years after the disappearance, John's wife and mother to Dorothy and Belinda also went missing. This prompted the sheriff's office to release a statement regarding John. It read, "At this time, Mr. John Trust is being investigated, and we encourage the public to come forward with any relevant information. However, as this investigation is still pending, we urge the public to refrain from any vigilante acts. Under the law, Mr. John Trust shall be treated as innocent until proven guilty." The Powderhorn publishers reached out to the children's former nanny, who wished to remain anonymous, and she had this to say: "The girl, Belinda, wasn't right in the head. It only got worse when Dorothy arrived. Belinda couldn't handle the lack of attention while Dorothy settled in. I don't believe Mr. Trust had anything to do with their disappearance. Like any mother, Patricia was heartbroken, and sometimes people can't come back from it. It's nothing but a tragedy in my eyes. And the former neighbors, Henry and Jill Hart, even vouched for John, attesting to his love for his children. They said, "Those that know the family know John loved his children. The community is scared and needs someone to blame, but they make up their claims without knowing the man nor his daughter. Belinda wasn't a girl we'd let our children play with. Patricia wasn't the same after her girls went missing, and we pray she finds her way back home." When asked to further explain the reason for this, Jill told reporters, "It wouldn't be right to speak ill of the dead. Those who know Belinda understand she wasn't right. Those forming their opinions hundreds of miles away are causing more harm than good. Patricia's disappearance is a testament to that." Only a few months after this publication, Patricia and Belinda's bones were found on the property showing signs of blunt trauma, but Dorothy's remains were never found. After this discovery, prosecutors alleged that Trust, a God-fearing man, had decided to take matters into his own hands after the numerous failed exorcisms of his daughter Belinda. Prosecutors went on to say they believed John had killed his wife Patricia to stop her from confessing his crimes to the police. I had all of this information without a conclusion and nothing to help me solve the problem. It was unnerving to think all of this could have occurred in the place I now call home. The very thought of returning to the cabin made my skin crawl. But I had no other options. I'd sunk everything into the property. On a whim, I looked up the Hart family. Henry and Jill Hart would be long gone by now, but if I was lucky, their children still lived in the town. After a few awkward conversations and a number of voicemails, I got in contact with their son Colton.
Hello?
Hi, is that Colton Hart?
Speaking.
Hi, I have some questions about your parents and the Trust family.
Are you a reporter or something?
No, I own the Trust property now. I've been having some problems.
Well, hot damn. It's true. Belinda's still there causing problems.
I don't even know where to begin. There was a baby in the woods and she, Belinda, came to my house.
Dorothy. They never found the poor child. My father let it slip Mr. Trust was having problems with Belinda, even after her death.
What kind of problems?
Seeing her around the place, I suppose. Father wasn't much for details.
Well, I was reading an article, and your parents said Belinda wasn't right. What did they mean by that?
Where do I even begin? Belinda liked having pets. Cats, dogs, you know, normal kid stuff. But Mrs. Trust told Mother she kept having accidents. Accidents that sent her pets to heaven, you know? She killed them as quickly as they replaced them. When Dorothy came along, Belinda couldn't even stand sharing with her. Treated poor Dorothy like one of her pets. Then they tried the exorcisms. I don't know the finer details, but it sure doesn't sound pleasant. These days they call it a mental illness and have networks to help kids like her. They have names and labels for those behaviors now. But times were different back then. Everything was God this and God that. I always believed it was a mental illness, though. Even when the rumors spread about her, you know, sticking around. I thought them to be old wives' tales. A good story to tell at night.
Do you believe John killed his family?
It's hard to say. My folks were adamant about Mr. Trust's innocence. Mother always had different theories, but the most prevalent one was that Belinda did something terrible to Dorothy, like she did with her pets. Mr. Trust may have seen this and decided to do something about it. Mrs. Trust was really torn up about losing Dorothy, but never once mentioned Belinda to my mother. Before she went missing, she asked my folks to take care of John, check up on him and such. They didn't think too much of it until she went missing too. Mother said Patricia didn't fear John, but rather loved him deeply. When they found the bones and reports of blunt trauma came out, it was hard to argue he hadn't done it. Mother continued to think of ways to redeem him, as heavily religious types. They believed suicide would close heaven's gates, so Mother said Mr. Trust the quote-unquote ultimate sacrifice, and put Mrs. Trust out of her misery before she did so herself. He probably believed he was already going to hell. Might as well save his wife's soul, right?
I think I saw Dorothy in a basket, and Belinda was standing next to her.
Jesus.
I felt Belinda's presence behind me, and Dorothy just disappeared.
Wait. What if this isn't Belinda's doing?
I don't follow.
They found the bones of Mrs. Trust and Belinda, but Dorothy is presumably still out there. What if it's Dorothy, reliving her experience each night?
But Belinda came to my house.
Could Belinda be Dorothy's greatest fear, but also her mask of malice, projecting the same fear she felt onto those who failed to protect her?
You have a well-thought theory for someone who didn't believe Belinda was still around.
I am my mother's son after all. As you can tell, the Trust family murderers were a big deal to my family, and now I'm old and brittle. I've got nothing to do but think. If you or anyone else can muster the balls to get out there and find Dorothy, it would be a great thing to put the bub out to rest next to her mother.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. You've given me a lot to think about.
Good luck. Let me know how it goes.
My conversation with Mr. Hart weighed heavy on my mind. The dreary office life didn't seem so bad right about now. I couldn't avoid the cabin forever, nor could I afford to keep paying for hotels. If I was going to do something, I had to do it now. Returning to the cabin in the day wasn't so bad. I still hadn't made my mind up on what I planned to do. But at night, when the crying started, the guilt came flooding in. Mr. Hart's words came to mind. I could try at least. I'd escaped once, I could do it again, right? For the second time I followed the screaming into the forest. Now more aware of what I was going to find, I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. Deeper into the forest, the screaming was once again interrupted by humming.
I will show you where I play hide and seek. Do you want to play hide and seek? You hide, and I'll find you.
Dorothy, I'm here to take you home.
Why do you seem so scared? All I wanted to do was play with you. Please come and play with me. I am so lonely.
Don't be afraid. Come with me. Unable to spot them, I scanned the surrounding area with my torch, but saw no sign of the girls. Pressing forward, Belinda's voice continued to speak to me.
Come to me, the men in the dark said, or else you won't see the sunset. I didn't see this as a threat, so he screamed at me until I bled. I don't want to play alone, but when I cry I hear a groan. I see a figure behind the wall. I'm so afraid he's going to fall.
Are you Dorothy or Belinda?
Help me. I'm begging you. Can you help me?
What happened to you?
I'm alone and scared. I lost my mommy. Can you help me?
In the distance, I saw her once again, in the same spot, swaying as she sung.
La 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 la. La 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 la. Here in the forest, dark and deep, I offer you eternal sleep.
Dorothy, I'm here to help. I walked toward Belinda, holding on to every ounce of strength I had left, praying, just praying that what Mr. Hart had said was true, that it was Dorothy and not Belinda. I was arm's reach away from Belinda, who remained frozen in place. I reached out with a shaking hand to grab the basket. Belinda's hand shot out and tightened around my wrist.
You're going to die.
No, I'm going to take you to your mother. When those words left my lips, Belinda did something unexpected. Her cold, frigid hands interlocked with my own and tightened. In a stunned disbelief, I watched as she faded, leaving only the basket. Quiet returned to the night, and cautiously I picked up the basket with Dorothy inside. We walked together through the darkness and to her mother's resting place. Since that fateful night, the crying has stopped, and though I'm relieved, I can't say I feel at ease. Mr. Hart and I made a pact to visit Dorothy's grave each week, but I can't help but wonder about Belinda, what the real truth in all that had taken place really was. At times, when the sun sets and darkness shrouds the property, I still feel like something is watching me